Now that we have both a low resolution and a high resolution version of our characters, what we now need to do in XSI is dedicate just a little bit of time to actually creating some kind of a UV layout for the low resolution version. All right, now the low resolution version of our character needs to have some kind of a UV layout because we're about to start transferring things like normal maps, color maps, depth maps, and things like that. Now the high resolution version of our character does not need to have any kind of UV layout on it. So that's the nice thing about this, because all the maps are going to be taken from this high resolution character and placed onto this guy. This one is the only one that needs to have any kind of a UV layout. So throughout this whole process, we only have to UV one character. Now, in this training kit, we're just going to talk very, very briefly about UVs in XSI and just kind of give you an overview of the actual workflow that XSI is going to use whenever making UVs. Right, now, if you need to know a little bit more about these, we actually do have a very lengthy, very extensive training kit on just using UVs and UV layout in XSI. All right, so with that in mind, let's take a look at just some of the basic workflows and some of the basic workflows involved in creating and modifying UVs in XSI. All right, now if I take a look at the texture editor in XSI, which can be found by going up to View, Rendering and Texturing, and down to the Texture Editor, or a lot of times I'll use the keyboard shortcut, which is Alt-7. And if I take a look at the Texture Editor, you can see that this object has no UVs whatsoever assigned to it. So what we need to do is assign some kind of a basic UV structure to this object. From there, we can start to use what are called sub-projections to actually sub-project different parts of this body. So to do this, what we can do is select the body itself, go down to Get, Property, Texture Projection, and then create any one of these different projections. Really, any one of these will work just fine for us because what we're going to do is come back and modify this UV layout pretty extensively. Right, so you can see once I create some kind of a UV projection, it creates this texture support around my object. Now this texture support is basically what's controlling the direction that this projection happens. So if I select my object, press Alt-7 to open up the texture editor, you can see that this is actually being projected from the side. All right, aligned perfectly with this texture support. So what I could do at any time is select this texture support, just select it, press Enter, and now I can come in and adjust the projection plane until I find something that's pretty suitable. So let's start with an XY plane. That'll give us a nice front projection. And if I take a look at the texture editor, you can now see how this is being projected from the front. And now what I can do, once I have some kind of a basic UV structure on this, is I can now come in and start to use sub-projections to actually get this the way that I need. So let me go ahead and get started with this. I'm going to close this texture editor, just minimize it. Now an easy way in XSI to be able to select a lot of different polygons is to select one and then Alt, middle click to be able to select the entire loop all the way around. So this makes the process of selecting these whole loops of polygons go very, very quickly. All right, and just hold your Shift key or Shift, Alt, middle click to be able to add to that selection. So now that we have that done, these different faces, we can now add what's called a sub-projection. So to do this, let's add a cylindrical sub-projection because we're dealing with a pretty cylindrical shape running down the length of this arm. So in this texture editor, let's add a cylindrical sub-projection. We'll use a best fit method. And here we go. We can now see that this sub-projection has now been placed along the length of the arm. And you can see that this new UV island has been created for us. Now, you'll see right now, as I move this actual island around by just using my move tool, just press the V key, you can see I'm actually moving these different points around. Now, if I want to be able to grab this entire island, what I can do is go up to Select and switch this to an island selection, or that can also be done by pressing the I key on your keyboard. So now when I select any of these points, it'll automatically select all of the points on this island. So now, once again, with my Move tool, again, that's the V key on my keyboard, I can now grab this new island and move this around. So if I switch this to a texture view, you can now see that as I move this around, the texture is now actually being shifted along this arm. So this is directly controlling how the texture flows around the surface of this arm. Right? So what I can do is, if I need to be able to straighten this out, you can see that there are some areas where this is definitely a little bit crooked. So what I can do is turn my island selection off. So now I can switch to my tag mode, just press the T key on my keyboard, switch to my scale tool, and you'll see that I can either left click to be able to scale in either axis uniformly. That's left clicking. If I middle click, that will scale this vertically, and if I right click, that will scale this horizontally. Alright, so what I can do is, like I said, just tag some of these points, scale these in just one axis to get these nice and straight, and there we go. So I'll select these, tag these, and straighten these out, and just continue that exact same process all the way through. So once again, take these, scale these inward, or if you want to be able to make sure that these are absolutely nice and straight, there actually is a shortcut for this. We can collapse these in either vertically or horizontally. So if I collapse vertically, you can see how these are now nicely lined. So once again, select all these, collapse vertically, and that will now get these perfectly lined up. So that's really the process of working and manipulating these UVs in XSI. So let me take just one more minute to make a few minor modifications to this. Okay, so we have that. I'm going to switch this back to island selection. Just press the I key on my keyboard and just move this over to where it's nice and out of the way. Okay, so what I can do now is come in, press the U keyboard shortcut on my keyboard, start to grab some of these different areas. So I'll start by grabbing this front part of the ring on top of this collar. Now what I want to do is try to grab just these polygons that are on the front part of the body, and what we'll do is do a new sub-projection for just the front part of this body. Alright, so let's go ahead and just shift select all of these different points, all of these different polygons. And again, I'm using the raycast polygon, which is the U keyboard shortcut on my keyboard. That way I can make absolutely sure that I don't select any of these faces or any of these polygons that are on the back side of my model. Alright, so I can grab some of these. Again, just shift select to add any of these polygons to my selection. And now, with these selected, I can do a new sub-projection just for these parts of the body. So because this part's relatively flat, we'll use a planar sub-projection. So once again, we'll do a best fit, and there we are. I can now pull this part over, scale this up or down as I need to, and there we go. Now one of the things that's really nice is that XSI will actually tell me if I have any of these UVs that are overlaying each other. So let me turn off my island selection, tag a few of these points, switch myself to my Move tool so I can now pull these different points around, and there we go. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the lesson at this point. In the next lesson, we'll continue to take a little bit further look at the process of working with these UVs in XSI before moving on to the process of actually moving and transferring some of this high-resolution detail from the high-resolution model down to this low-resolution game character.